the oldest and one of the biggest rivalries in the league.
Bad blood from year one.
Uh-oh, this is even worse.
Oh, hideous. Hideous.
Eastern Conference semifinals. Taken down hard, and the penalty kick is signaled. Diaz Arce takes the kick and scores. Metro Stars' inaugural season comes to a close.
There was something in the soccer bloodlines in this country that ensured that this was going to be arguably the most intense rivalry.
I think this is it's just cheating. Eddie Gavin, the teenager, scores! An improbable goal and win for the Metro Stars.
Eskandarian.
And he's going to drink a Red Bull.
Rubbing it in.
McCarthy. Kenny Cooper. Flag stays down. Kenny Cooper is found. Kenny Cooper once again. Saved! Oh, goodness, he scored!
That rivalry will always be the first. The tradition of this rivalry, it's only going to get stronger.
You can't hold me back. Come on. You got to start on that high. Bill Hamid, of course, what does red mean? What does black mean? It means the Atlantic Cup. It is the rivalry in Major League Soccer, and we're going to do it differently. Here today, we're going to go through some of the greatest moments in Atlantic Cup history here on MLS Classics Remix Fan Edition. So we've got 3 fans with us, of course. I'm the sole professional here. Let's start with a former Metro star, current Red Bull fan since 97, ESC member, Brent Gamet. We've also got James Lambert, president of the Screaming Eagles, down in D.C., a fan since 96, and a man who needs no introduction, but I will do it anyway. Our legend, our god, our armchair analyst, Mr. Matt Doyle. I mock Matt Doyle because he is an original Metro Stars fan, but now he is fully professional, so he is coming in as a neutral observer for this MLS Classics Remix.
I've been neutral for 10 years. I figure I could relive my roots a little bit on this show. So Chicago and Washington.
I just want everyone to know Doyle texted me last night at 9 o'clock that he was sick, so that was his flu game performance.
Right.
And that trumpet was on point. It sounded really, really good. Before we get into Doyle's story, Brent, let's start with you. You've been in New York, New Jersey. You've been a fan for a long time. How did you get involved with the team? What does the Atlantic Cup mean to you?
I've been a fan since, I came back from college in 95, graduated in 95. So, came back to New York City. And this was around when the baseball lockout happened. So I'm like, okay, I got to do something new. So, you heard radio advertising for the team. And I'm like, oh, cool, Giant Stadium. I can't get there. I don't have a car. So I watched the first year from home. And then 97, I'm like, you know what? We make concentrated effort to go. So I went to one game at Giant Stadium, but then I went to the Open Cup game at Columbia, and that basically sealed it for me forever. And haven't really looked back since then. Bought a half-season ticket the next year, 98, and then once that was over, I went to 101, and that's basically, it's been like that ever since.
Leading chants, one of the loudest voices if you've ever been in a stadium with Brent.
Louder than my trumpet. Louder than my trumpet, yeah.
As well as a decent drummer. I've listened to that as well. Carries a good beat. On the flip side, down the I-95 highway, James, I mentioned fan since 96, now president of Screaming Eagles, so a lot of responsibility. What does DC United mean to you? What's been your experience? What's the Atlantic Cup for you?
I mean, DC United, I'm from the Virginia burbs, so grew up in this area, and perfect timing for me. 96, 97 was junior and senior year of high school, so nothing but free time to get to go to matches. I was actually in Germany the summer of 96, got to see him win the European Championship, so I was just in the supporter mindset coming back. And I just went and saw everything in the fall of that year. The Atlantic Cup means, to me, it showed what the league could do, like in the early years, like with actual passionate supporters and true rivalry and that sort of energy that wasn't replicated everywhere. That's what it meant to be kind of in the early years, and I've just been amazed by how many even while you're watching these great moments that keep happening in this rivalry. Again and again, that's what makes any rivalry is actual great matches.
Not so great from my perspective.
We've got a lot of great highlights to watch coming forward.
Keeping it real, yeah.
Doyle, I mentioned for you're a Connecticut native, so you're a New Englander, so you're a front runner, and obviously the Revs weren't great out the gate, so it gave you an opportunity to root for a New York team, while you also rooted for the Celtics, Warriors, Red Sox, Yankees, I don't know who else. But in all seriousness,
I would never root for the Yankees.
Harlem Globetrotters.
I'm glad we found one team. We found that one thing. What do you remember about the early days of these games? And we're going to start off, right in 1996, that first playoff series, the first for either franchise, 3-game series, wild theatrics, and as James said, those moments teams have created this history of the Atlantic Cup.
Yeah, so I caught the soccer bug a little bit in '86 when I was 9 years old and was introduced to the World Cup, and then, over the subsequent 8 years leading up to '94 World Cup, I got the bug real bad, and I go to Connecticut Wolves games. When I went to UConn, I was like absolutely the biggest UConn soccer fan, and I would cover both teams and all that. And I knew, BC. I knew in first of all, when MLS started, I was a day one fan, but I knew at that point, after college, I was going to end up in Boston or New York. And I wanted to be a fan of the team that I was going to, live near. I wanted to be able to support a team that I could go to all their games. And so that first year, I went to a bunch of Revs games in Foxborough, and I went to like one or maybe two Metro games down in New Jersey, and I didn't know what it was going to be. And then at the end of the year, actually, the game we're going to start with, this third game of the playoff series, it's an epic game. It's an epic series. DC was a better team and the favorite and all that. Metro fights back, and then just absolutely that curse at the end gives the series to DC and really launches their dynasty. And it was just such extreme pain. And I realized how angry I was in the moment. And that's when I realized that I was a Metro fan and that I would be moving to New York rather than Boston after college was over.
So Doyle mentioned it, the pain, the anguish, the excitement, the energy. First year, of course, of Major League Soccer in 1996. Took DC a little while to find their feet that season. This is the first ever playoff series for either of these franchises. The setup was a best of three. First game was at the lower seed, I believe. Then second game goes to DC. And then if it was still tied, it would go to a third game in DC. And this is the first game of the series. The first game of MLS postseason history, DC versus New York. Doyle, were you at this game?
I was not at this game, but I remember that moment right there very well. Diaz Arce just absolutely murdered Metro for those first 2 years. And thinking back to these DC teams, we had this argument, David, on Extra Time the other day, like the 97 DC team or the 98 DC team. I still maybe kind of lean towards the 97 DC team because that's the one with Diaz Arce in addition to Jaime and Echeverry. Oh, God. What a start.
Christ.
James,
you also
one,
see that. What's that?
Sorry, year one, DC United. What was the buzz around the team? What was it like being a fan?
I mean, there was a positive buzz. I think what was so exciting and what hooked me in the long run is DC came out with great energy in the stands. And a lot of that grew from the Salvadoran and Bolivian communities in DC coming out to support Echeverry and Diaz Arce and then Moreno and building kind of that original Barra Brava. And just in general, my seats, every one of these goals involves like the ball bouncing all over the turf. It's like a basketball game. Yeah.
That's awesome. He was awesome.
Nobody played that AstroTurf hop the way Patufo did.
Yeah. But look at this first, the bounce off the first. Boing.
Everything's just a half volley if the ball can't sit flat.
It's crazy actually. Pope gets beaten for both these goals in this match, which was rare.
Yeah.
I also love this United look. They went back to it in 2020, the red shorts with the black jerseys.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was part of. Yeah, that was part of the thing with DC. Like you said, right out the gates, the supporters culture in DC, in part because of the bouncing stands, right?
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah, that didn't hurt. That did not hurt.
Again,
but just like DC was cool in a way that other MLS teams weren't. They had the bouncing stands. You had such a multicultural fan base, which is that was some Metro Stars fans right there. And then you had the cool uniforms as well. It just, like, right out the gates, just so much further ahead than anybody else in the league.
And you have to give credit to Kevin Payne for that. I mean, he got, he's a difficult man in a lot of ways, but there's some things he got. And they really fought for the uniforms, and they made sure that they had outreach to the Spanish-speaking communities, that you had radio and other media at the matches. And that was way ahead of the game, which we almost didn't see until 2006-07 with Toronto and Seattle and those teams making that.
Yeah, I don't know the scuttlebutt behind the Kevin Payne thing. I just knew that he was like Grand Moff Tarkin. You know what I mean?
He's an interesting, difficult personality.
But a lot of it's come out recently about how much leeway teams had in signing early players. He was the one who got John Harkes. He locked in on Echeverri. He built that team. What's the Gio Savarese legend for Metro Stars fans?
Well, for me, he wasn't the most athletically gifted player, so he was like literally the heart on the sleeve guy that he will do anything and everything because of the limited athletic ability to just be there when you need him. And he was inspirational for that because. Oh my God! It was brilliant just to see him. And there was a couple of drafts where he showed up, and I made sure to go up to him and just shake his hand and just give him laud and praise that he deserves. And he's like, I'm still happy that guys like you still follow the team. He said that to me. I was like, that's awesome. So I know that he coached Cosmos and all that stuff, and coaches Timbers now, but he'll always be one of the first Metros that I worship.
And he's a local guy too. Like he's a Venezuelan international. Everybody knows that.
Delphi, right?
He played college there, and then he played for the Rough Riders.
Right?
Yeah. So he was a guy like nobody knew who Gio Savarese was, and he came into the league and was one of the original nobody knows who I am. I'm going to use this to launch my career, and
like digital Takawira.
Yeah, he was not supposed to. Oh my God, look at this shootout.
I think he mentioned to me last year, Doyle. I think he still owns a place in Bay Ridge. Gio.
That's a beautiful jersey.
I think he owned it the whole time and has come back and forth. First shootout, guys, of the day.
I love it.
How pumped is everyone to watch a shootout?
I'm one of these guys who hated it in the time because it wasn't with global rules, and now I'm like, you know what? This is a heck of a lot better than penalties.
I'm glad it's gone.
Yeah,
I'm glad it's gone too. I don't need it.
Sounds like
I got
Is this where he says take the effing shot?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is the if we.
Because I remember watching this on TV at home.
Yeah,
I was watching this on TV at home, and I think the camera was right up to his face, thinking that he wouldn't say it on MSG, and then lo and behold, there it was. Oh, here it is.
Yeah. God, Peter
Very
Vermees.
slim Peter Vermees.
So giftable even back then.
Yeah.
We shoot, we win.
Yes,
that was it. Or I shoot, we win, yeah.
So funny. When he came back for Kansas City, he was doing an interview right by the player tunnel, and then we hit him with Metro reject chants so loud that they had to cut the interview from the TV. It was awesome. That was awesome. That was so awesome. Oh, Jeff Agus. We have a chant for him, but I can't say it because this is a PG-13 podcast.
Could you say it on an R, or is it NC-17?
Bruce looking for his belt too.
Well, there was a chant we had for Agus where he's like, it was based on his World Cup performance that he scored more goals than all of France. And we were at Mulligan's in Hoboken, and allegedly he left out the back because he didn't want to walk through the ESC and get hit with the chant again on the way out after the game.
So
yeah, I would not be an
Metro
employee
Stars
of
took
the
the
Department
first
of State.
game. Metro Stars took the first game in a shootout, which sent it back down to DC, made Game 2 a must-win game for DC. If New York won, it would have ended the series best of 3, as Peter Vermes limps his way in on this shootout. I think JF Agus mentioned the key was to have the ball in the air for a shootout. If you flicked it up, that meant you could do anything with it. If it's on the ground, it made it a lot harder.
You could always chip them.
Yeah, I'm going to duck out of here for about 5 minutes, so you guys can watch this by yourselves. Thanks. Thanks,
Brent's
guys.
got spotty internet. He warned us before.
Come back
so he
in
might go in and out.
2014, Brent.
There it is, though.
This
the
match.
first bouncing stands of the day.
Oh, yeah.
James, we missed them
Chelsea
heavily.
does.
We missed them dearly.
Oh, I miss them too. I mean, I don't know how you can never replicate them with any sort of insurance in play, but it was a really cool place to be.
This team was
It's
so
like a station
good.
wagon, and you
It's good.
sat in the way back. That's what RFK and the
Yeah.
bouncy stand for. Oh,
Sneaky Pete. Or is that Rommel?
Seamus is
Steve Rommel.
Steve Rommel. Seamus is convinced he's offside here. I was actually on the other. There used to be temporary when the Washington football team still played there in '96. There used to be temporary stands behind the south that were like wooden that also moved. That's where I was for this match. With what turned out to be like tunnel vision for the Rob Johnson. Saw it all the way across the field. It's outstanding. It's such a nice goal.
We had a song for RFK regarding the former quarterback of that Washington NFL team.
Oh, no. Don't do that.
We'll just leave that
Don't
one
do
on.
that, right? Don't do
Yeah,
that,
you
right?
guys said it's a PG-13 podcast. You know, I have nothing to offer here. Except me watching that. Oh, Jesus.
James, was
This
there a
team was
buzz
so good, man.
coming in, being down a game, first year? Was there a buzz in the crowd that this team was going to get it done? What was the feeling?
Yeah, there definitely was. I think people were confident in the team by this, point in the year, but it's an elimination match. I do think that there was a feeling that developed around DC, probably even after the series, that they just were always going to pull it out. I mean, I had not been around long enough that by 1998 it was like, oh, you go down early in a match, like, nope, they're coming back and winning. It was this irrational confidence. Maybe the Atlanta fans and Seattle fans also experienced when they started. But have since learned otherwise.
Yeah, that's what folks these days maybe don't quite understand is that DC United fans those first 4 years were the original Seattle and Atlanta
we invented
fans.
soccer, yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah, you guys invented soccer, and you guys invented online trolling, whether it was like the old Usenet groups.
And they invented wearing club team colors at national team games. That's what.
Yeah, that's what DC United.
Oh.
God, you guys. Just miserable. Just miserable group.
So when we saw any DC United fans at World Cup, we would start anti-DC stuff. So, here, we're here for the United States. Yeah, but you're wearing that, that rag on your, that. So it was,
And now I have a couple different red, white, and blue
Code word
DC
rap.
jerseys that I can wear to U.S. matches.
See, that's DC fan thinking right there. Come on
yeah,
now.
exactly.
Doyle, for this early Metro Stars team, Tab Ramos, Tony Miola, Peter Vermes, the names.
The three tenors.
Was
three
there
tenors.
expectations? Like, obviously, Tab didn't have the health in his MLS career that you would have liked.
Yeah.
But
Here
was
it
there
comes.
idea
Here
that this
comes
should
this
be
touch.
the best team?
And that's the moment right there that I became a Metro fan. That's the moment.
That's so Metro.
I was in Midtown West, like a couple of blocks away from Rockefeller Center, when I saw that in some bar on 7th Avenue or something.
And maybe the moment that created the
dollar
DC United
shooters at a
dynasty.
Margaritaville for
It
an
really
hour before
did.
that.
This touch
Oh,
by
for sure.
Echeverry that opened up.
Yeah, it's just an incredible touch by Echeverry. And again, Echeverry, if he played in the league, the same with Moreno. If those guys played in the league today, they would still be best 11 caliber.
Vermes
players.
got his ankles broken Oh my
Yeah,
god.
he did. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, a number 9 playing central defense. Yeah, that's.
I mean, he kept playing there. He eventually was Defender of the Year in 2000 for that Kansas City team as a sweeper.
Which is also very
Matt
Metro
Knowles.
to trade away
Wow,
a guy who
Matt
then
Knowles.
becomes
100%. 100%. But no, like David, to get back to your question, there were huge expectations. Everybody, once Donadoni was on board and Tab, like there was an expectation that this was going to be the best team in the league.
And
but it was
Patufo.
just, and then they got Patufo, right? And
Yeah.
but it was dysfunctional from day one. You know, there was no clear vision. It was just. You know, the GM back then had no idea how to run a team. He just wanted to collect names. He was just really proud of his
He's
little
a promoter.
he's a promoter. Proud of his little black book and not really a soccer guy. And so he put together a team that just kept getting worse and worse under his watch.
I got a story about Charlie.
Arguably more talent than anyone else in the league.
I have one Charlie story. So
Hit it.
in '99, journalist Richard Sandomir, who I think was writing for the Times
Brent, let me just interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
At this point, for DC United, this win sets up a meeting with Tampa Bay in the Eastern Conference Championship. And it's this, of course, Diaz Arce, there's never a doubt he's going to bury this. Tampa Bay had actually run away with the Supporter Shield the first year, even though there technically was no Supporter Shield the first year. But DC United owned them. DC United. So
couldn't be
as soon as this was over, you knew DC United was going to MLS Cup and that they were probably going to win it. God, I hated that team. Sorry, Brent. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my only Charlie story is in '99 on a bus ride from Port Authority, Richard Sandomir, the journalist, was on the bus with us, and he asked me, "So Brent, what is the biggest reason for the Metro Stars not being good?" And I spelled Charlie's name CHARLIE, and then it made the story. And then at the '06 draft in Baltimore, he walks up to me and says, "Brent, you still mad?"
Oh, man.
And I
What did you
did
say?
something. I did a Peter McNichol thing, and I said bygones. You know, I did like. I just said bygones. You know.
On a video series where you are still angry about something that happened 24 years ago, 25 years ago, I think this is probably fitting to know that everyone at least hangs on to all of these things. So James, we mentioned the creation of the dynasty. DC goes from there, as Doyle said, beats Tampa, beats the Galaxy in the first ever MLS Cup up in New England. What do you remember about?
Wait, were you at that MLS Cup up in New England?
No, actually, it's one of the biggest regrets of my life. I turned down a ride to go up there.
Fan.
I know.
Fake fan.
I know. It's killer. I wasn't. Yeah, it was at that match. And I was at the Tampa match. I did not go up all the way to Foxborough. I think the dynasty, like, this continued. Even was it the '97 opener that Metro came into RFK and Tony? I think DC may have won 1-0, but Tony Miola just stood on his head and really just played it. There was a match where a bottle rocket shot out of the bar of Brava and hit one of the athletic trainers in the head for Metro and like set fire to his bag.
That story, like some of the old school guys were like, these were the types that like the extracurriculars, if you know what I mean. And he said to me, he's like, yeah, when they did that, I'm like, yeah, these guys are serious and I respect them and I can't wait to meet them. That's sort of like, and I'm just like, I'll be here with the songs, guys. I'm good.
Yeah, I know. There was real animosity.
Doyle,
I mean,
on the
it was
field?
real. That stuff was like real. That whole
Yeah.
fan on fan thing, like the extracurriculars, that was some real stuff back in the day. And I'm just like, yeah, man, I'll just if you want me to be in charge of the songs, I'll do the songs. I got that one.
Doyle, on the field, you mentioned the penalty kick, the pain, but Metro Stars hit the post. Crazy goal line saves on both sides. Did that game, that third game of that series, was that what created the rivalry or solidified it?
It solidified it because, I mean, it was a 10-team league. And so these teams had already, like that final game of the 3-game series, that was the 7th time these two teams had met this year. And, as James and Brent were just saying, there were extracurriculars. Everybody, and we're all old Big East guys. So we have that for hoops.
6 fouls.
for hoops as well. Yeah, that was the 6 fouls era. And like I remember my fondest memory from 1996 was actually the Big East men's basketball championship when Ray Allen.
On that note,
Ray Allen absolutely destroyed Allen Iverson and the trash Georgetown team. I think BC had folded their program by that point.
Can we mute him?
Get off my show!
Thomas, can we mute him? On that note, let's go to a celebrity.
Alonzo Mourning in
overtime.
Yeah. Well, the Big East podcast, you can follow along on Twitter at Doyle, and then he'll put it up. But let's go to Judah Freelander for a second to explain what we're about to watch in 2003.
Welcome to MLS Storytime Theater. I'm the world champion, Judah Friedlander. Today's story is called Cheatin' Bob and the Great Switcheroo. Soccer, it is said, provides many life lessons. There's no substitute for hard work and dedication. Discipline and teamwork make winners. If you can exploit a weird loophole in the rules and profit from it, good for you. Back in July of 2003, on a steamy hot day at RFK Stadium, the Metro Stars and DC United were tied after 90 minutes. In those days, they played overtime in MLS. Ties were un-American. Now, both teams had already used up their maximum of 3 field player substitutions, but the Metro's coach, Bob Bradley, was desperate to get a fresh pair of legs onto the pitch. So Bob reached into his bag of tricks and remembered a now defunct MLS loophole, which was basically that even after using up all 3 of your field player substitutions, you could still substitute the goalie. So Bradley, before overtime started, designated midfielder Mark Lisi as a goalie and substituted him with Eddie Gavin as the new goalkeeper, even though Gavin was just a midfielder, and he reassigned Tim Howard as the midfielder, who's actually the goalie. You confused? So was everyone.
So they've made a temporary goalkeeper substitution. I hate this rule. Yeah. By the way, I think this is just cheating. Yeah. It's just cheating. But it's in there, and that's what it is.
So Tim Howard put on a field player's jersey over his goalkeeper jersey and played midfield for about 10 seconds. And in goal was scared 16-year-old non-goalie, youngest player in MLS history at the time, Freddie Adu before he was Freddie Adu, Eddie Gavin. So the ball goes out of bounds. Then Gavin and Howard take off their top shirts, still have their other shirts on. Howard goes back into goal. Gavin goes to midfield. The great switcheroo has occurred. With Howard back in goal and Eddie Gavin with energy to burn, even Coach Bradley could not have dreamt what would happen next.
Far post, Petke. Ivana, what a save by Howard! Good gracious! And here's a break for the Metro Stars. Eddie Gavin, the teenager, onside. Slides it, he scores! Eddie Gavin, an improbable goal and win for the Metro Stars!
The great switcheroo earned Bradley the nickname Cheatin' Bob, at least among the very upset DC United supporters. But technically, it was legal. And for me, it earns him 2 thumbs up for brains and 3 cojones for courage. I'm the world champion, Judah Friedlander. Join me again next time for MLS Storytime Theater.
This was one of those times when the league used to play 3 p.m. Saturday matches on July 5th in D.C. I mean, it was miserable for this match. Which is why the Force
Meadowlands wasn't great either during a hot game. Yeah. The Meadowlands is terrible also.
Because the loud side with the bouncing stands, afternoon match, the sun was like right in your face, like the entire time.
I also think, I mean, obviously this is an iconic moment. So memorable, but also like you get to hear Rob Stone going through puberty as the highlight happens, which is absolutely amazing to me. I've always appreciated that about this highlight.
What jersey is Tim Howard wearing? What name is, like, can you wear someone else's jersey in a soccer game?
He's got one that apparently has no number on it, which really shouldn't be legal either, right? You have to have
there's so many question marks.
And also today,
Mickey Mouse the jersey Euro snobs all over the world. Yeah,
the jersey switch they do wouldn't be allowed today. They would have to come off and be approved by the 4th official.
Right.
So for a couple of seconds here, Metro would have been playing with 9 men, including no goalkeeper. Yeah, so it's.
Well, that's what it felt like normally during any game with DC.
I mean, this. As I said, this is.
Brett, there was hope this year, right? Because this was the first year Bob Bradley was in charge, and Bob Bradley was considered hands down the best coach in MLS at that point.
Got us to our first final, yeah.
Yeah, he had just, and that was this year. He had just left the Fire, forced his way to Metro. While at the same time, DC stunk. DC, as great as their first 4 years were, 2000, 2001, 2002, they were awful. And then 2003, it looked like they were going to be better, and they drafted Aleko, and like there was some hope. But by the middle of the year, it was clear it was not going to happen for this team. So there was a lot of hope for Metro that this was going to be the year, this was going to be the group that could do it. Oh my God!
This game actually ends. These 3 points ends up being massive. That Eddie Gavin gets them. It's the difference between the two teams at the end of the season.
At the end, yeah.
Obviously, they both then go and lose in the first round of the playoffs anyway, between 3 and 4. James, was there any Bob Bradley being Bruce's former assistant? Was there any Bob Love before this, or had the Chicago stuff already wiped out?
The Chicago stuff turned off. I mean, that ended with MLS Cup '98.
Ohio State kicker, right?
Yep.
Hey, there was definitely a feeling that.
Is that Yap fan?
Yeah.
Oh God. Sorry, James. Continue.
No, it's fine.
Brent just left on that note.
I do think there was a pride, especially after this period, that even with Bruce Arena and Bob Bradley, that Metro couldn't end up pulling out a new trophy. But yeah, I mean, the teams had changed. 2003, there was a little period of hope for us. Ray Hudson was an amazing quote and a very average manager, and he was very dedicated to playing his hairy-chested Bulgarians with Stoichkov and Glenn Ivanov, which is what he called them, and players like Aleko, and didn't see much of the pitch this year, but. Yeah, the team was still lacking something, and you knew it was going down. When you saw the substitution happen, with as hot as it was, you knew which direction this was heading.
It is amazing. Yeah,
Staten
Island Messi.
Staten Island Ronaldinho. That was the chant. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah. This was pre-Messi, David. Come on now.
Yeah.
His players call.
Yeah, this was Ronaldinho's time to shine. This part of the decade. Right?
Yeah, this was his era.
Yeah.
That's my guy. It's amazing to me that in July of this season, no one had done this yet.
Right.
No, other coaches had tried. Other coaches had absolutely tried, but this is the first time that it happened and it worked. And
what is it that other coaches did that wasn't allowed?
No, I don't remember the exact. So I don't remember the exact sequence, but I don't think Bob was the first coach to think of this, right? Because we've seen those types of subs before. It just hadn't paid off in this kind of way. And I actually remember watching this game. My wife and I were on vacation in San Diego with her parents, and it was like noon on the West Coast. And they're like, we have to go to some chain restaurant to watch an MLS game. And I was like, yes, absolutely, we have. And this is like the first time I had ever met their parents, which maybe not the best call,
but
because
accurate.
This wasn't the greatest game, but it had an exciting ending. So.
Tim Howard,
I have a
New Jersey
Ray
native
Hudson story. I have a Ray Hudson story, sort of. It was a draft where Phil Shane was in the crowd, and he found out that I could, sort of imitate Ray Hudson, and I did the movie stars and tennis, the tennis players and movie stars quote that he had when Real won the league or something. And Phil Shane I'd never seen him laugh so hard in his life.
Can we get a little? Yeah.
I don't sound like a Geordie at all. I don't sound like a Geordie.
Do it.
I'd rather do Connery.
You can't. You can't.
Movie stars and tennis players, or something. And he just laughed like. I do a better Connery than Ray Hudson.
Well, now you have to do the rest of this video in a Scottish brogue then. Look at that textbook defending from Metro right there.
Yeah.
Chris Leach off the line, right?
Yep.
What's also amazing, Doyle, is you talked about the emotion of
Toronto.
New York feeling hopeful at this time and DC being on a downturn, and then DC wins MLS Cup, 15 months after this?
04, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Boy.
that's the state of this rivalry for a really long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
This
I
is
mean,
great.
in terms of total trophies, I think that DC is still the most successful team in MLS history.
I think LA and them are tied. It's just that LA has 5 MLS Cups and DC has 4. They have the 99 win against Vasco da Gama, which nobody ever talks about.
98.
I thought that was
98.
That was incredible.
That was. Yeah,
I mean,
even though the away game was in Miami or something, right? The away game was not in Brazil,
it was at Lockhart. Yeah.
Yep, it was at Fort Lauderdale.
But, you know, I thought that was a pretty big.
And that Vasco team was a wagon, man. That team was legit.
It had Edmundo on it. It had Edmundo
and Juninho.
Yeah, Juninho.
A future
Metro star.
Yeah.
Juninho sort of... Was it Juninho that scored the sick goal in the first leg at RK? Somebody had
I never saw it. I never saw it on TV. I don't think it was televised.
I don't think they showed the first leg on TV.
Of course not.
Yeah.
The second leg they did, at least on locally.
Hey, it's Mo Johnston.
I watched the second leg at Nevada Smiths. I remember that. Oh Lord.
I'm surprised that Nevada showed anything MLS related in that time.
Well, it was more Vasco da Gama related. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that was a Fox Sports World, or whatever it was called at that point.
Yeah, it was
Fox Sports World, because it was
the best soccer channel in history. Seriously, the best stuff ever.
It was awesome.
You got to watch Argentine League for paying cable. You know, it's amazing.
This thing, even on the field, you could see the kind of seeds of next year's championship team. There, Ryan Nelson. They didn't play Esky very much, but Eskandarian, Brian Namath, Brian Carroll, we're all on this roster.
Oh, Wally, second touch needed to be better. That's a penal, sir.
Nick Ramondo.
The ref is the 12th man.
I'll agree. When they make this sub too, it's actually Mark Lisi that they bring off, who's drafted by DC. And I think it's one of the other great things about this rivalry is this isn't old school Rangers Celtic where nobody ever crossed over. There were plenty of players. I mean, Pecky's on the field for DC in this match, who went back and forth because there were so few teams, and that brought up I think Mark Lisi kissed the Metro badge after he scored against us.
There's a guy who played for both of these teams in the same year who won an MVP.
Yeah, right. Zero.
You have multiple Mount Rushmores that played for both. It makes no sense.
Jaime Moreno scored for Metro in this when he was doing his secret agent thing and sabotaging them.
Yeah, but absolutely he was doing that.
Yeah.
He is the greatest player in DC United history.
Yeah.
And he played for the other team for a year.
Here we go.
Key club legend, but here it is. Eddie Gavin off the bench as goalie.
And he holds off Nelson.
Ramondo cannot believe it.
Believe it.
And I think it's Chris Leach that looks over or it's Mike McGee that looks over we stole something. You see Mike? I think. Yeah, McGee. Look at him. He's like, hey, look.
Yeah.
We stole something.
McGee's also, 17 at this time? 16?
Yeah, McGee's 17.
I think all those guys
Gavin
got drafted.
16.
Yeah, 16.
That was
Ricardo
the
Clark
year where
19.
it was Ricardo Clark and McGee were drafted 2 and 4. Oh, Brad Davis too was on the next year.
Brad Davis was the year before. They traded Davis to get
all these guys. Gavin wins a cup in Columbus.
Yep.
Brad Davis wins a cup. Rico Clark wins a cup.
Michael Bradley.
2 cups. in Houston. Michael Bradley goes.
Yeah, well, we got
Michael
Rico
Bradley was the
Clark.
next year.
Michael, yeah, that's it.
Oh God! But that was the story of the Metro Stars for a decade. They just anything good they had, they got rid of it before it could germinate into something that would be legitimately a winning team for us. And it's the complete opposite for DC, right? Because DC had that first great dynasty, which is unquestionably the best dynasty in MLS history. And then in what we're going to see next, I assume, is 2004 playoffs. And this is the start of what is almost another dynasty, because it's 2004 MLS Cup, 6-7 Supporter Shield, and then 8 U.S. Open Cup. Like, that's four titles in 5 years for the... I just hate DC. I just hate them.
I love that James is making sure you get all of them. James is counting as Doyle goes through it.
I approve Matt's message.
Yeah.
James, Brent, one of the things, though, we talked about when we were coming on is it's not, New York, DC has a rivalry, but with soccer, with MLS, it's supporters going to games, and that's such a big part, and you mentioned some of the things that have happened. You talked about the bus trip and what that means for winning one of these games, the, 5 a.m. departure in the morning and then the 7-hour drive back late at night?
Yeah, I just remember that there was a lot of bus trips where we had to do a lot of stuff after the game on the bus ride home to kind of forget what happened. And sometimes we'd chant for about an hour and a half after and maybe see like Spies Like Us for like the 40th time.
Doctor?
Stuff like that. And then you'd come up with like songs to make fun of your friends on the bus, and it goes around. Like we'll do things like the 12 Days of Steve Santos, it's... Like, you had to occupy your time when you had like a really crushing loss on your way home. Since that happened,
it's brutal. It was brutal if you lost.
It allowed us to be really creative. On the way home.
You would get back till 2-3 in the morning, and this was the only drivable rivalry, really, at this time.
Well, New England. For us, it was New England as well.
New England, right? But for us, it was really the only. I mean, we'd make trips to Columbus, but it was long. It wasn't as many people. We'd bring multiple buses up the Meadowlands. Funnily, we both refer to each other as the Swamp at different times where we play. But yeah, I most of what my close friendships and sports clubs were formed on these specific trips. I very fondly remember this 2004 trip with the Ernie Stewart goal. And how things have changed. From the Bradley team and Cheatin' Bob, and I have to say about Cheatin' Bob. It was against the spirit of the rules. Okay? This was not actually against the rules. This wasn't Jim Calhoun level cheating.
Oh my god!
This was just.
Oh my god!
This was just
Jim Calhoun level cheating. Oh my god! Says the fan of a Georgetown team that's emptying out right now. Every player on that team's leaving.
I just want to say this. I'm worried that Brent's eyes might just roll out of his head by the time we get to Red Bulls winning games.
Yeah, because I gotta listen to like Georgetown, UConn, in addition to this.
Sure.
I mean,
and I'm pretty sure Doyle's going to
Hey Matt, can you play the Notre Dame fight song on that trumpet too? Because that would be another.
Not yet. For the next show, we do absolutely. James, I do want to ask this.
Yeah.
So, Philly's been in the league for a decade now. Philly, and
drive-through country, that's what I call it.
And it hasn't really become a rivalry between you guys and the Union just yet. And my theory is that there's just so much cross-pollination between DC United's old school supporters and the Sons of Ben. Like, you guys were together on those bus trips going. Is that and so? What would it take for the Union to become an apex level rivalry for DC United?
It's going to take both teams being good and playing these sorts of matches. I mean, it's not only that Philly and DC have been not strong clubs for most of the existence of Philadelphia, not at the same time, but also even when they're both in the playoffs, we haven't played each other. I think we played in one Open Cup match last year, but really we haven't played knockouts against each other. And you're right, there wasn't that initial hostility. I mean, a couple of the founders of Sons of Ben were Scream Eagles for the first number of years. And so, until we have those matches, you don't have the heartbreak yet. As you said, like what made you a fan? It was the loss. That's what really solidified it. And Philly and DC haven't burned each other like that quite yet to make the next level.
I'm still waiting, sort of, for them to burn each other.
I was going to say, I don't think Philly's burned a lot of people so far. Although they did knock the Red Bulls out of Open Cup.
Oh, look at Ernie Stewart, 12
there you go,
miles
Ernie.
offside. 12 miles offside.
So, James,
This
you
is
mentioned
the
the bus
worst
trip
call.
for
This is the worst call in MLS playoff history up until 2015 MLS Cup.
The
This
ref
is it. This is the
is the
single
12th
worst
man.
call. Yeah.
this. So this is the
Always the
2004
story.
playoffs between
Yes.
New York and D.C. Doyle, Brent, James, take it away.
So, I'm there in the stands behind where where Ernie's chanting to right now. So I have no idea if he was offside. I'm blind drunk. I'm on the end line behind where he scores. So really don't ask me. I've never seen an angle that actually shows where he is when the ball is struck. But yeah, he's pretty far behind. This was also a period. I have one of the tickets from the match, and you may see the MPF on there. Some brainiac
Metro
up in Jersey
Playoff
started
Fever.
what was the Metro Playoff Fever campaign.
Dan Ryzanski,
and
Metro fanatic
yeah,
himself.
we referred to it as Metro Playoff Failure for years, and there was a graphic for Thanksgiving with a turkey and a Metro jersey. I mean, it was just perfect. Like, we didn't even have to do it. It was just put out there by the club. Those turned into large posters for this.
I mean, the club memed itself with Metro Playoff
exactly.
Fever. Like we didn't have the word meme back then, but it was absolutely like the marketing campaign was a meme.
They put stupid hats on people. It was very, very easy to mock. And this period was probably, for us, where you felt like our club was so on top. We were wondering, was this going to continue as a rivalry? Metro was, falling apart again, kind of through the 04-07 years. And, this series wasn't even close. Like, I think Ryan Nelson said it at one point. He's like, listen, it's 4-0 aggregate.
No,
we don't have
no, it was close until that goal. It was 1-0 until that goal, and Metro was having the better of the chances. That rekindled the spirit of the rivalry, because DC had been such a doormat for the previous 4 years. It felt like it was never going to happen again. But then what happens is, just like in the early days, just like in the good old days, in a crunch game, in a really tense environment, DC have the refs as their 12th man, and so it was like the same old story all over again. It's like, okay, so the league's never going to let Metro win a playoff series against these freaking bums. That's what it felt like, James.
Well,
James, you mentioned the ticket. You've got a whole lot going on behind you. Brent as well. Do you guys want to show off a little memorabilia for us while you, James, continue to explain the second dynasty of DC United and how it was inevitable at all times?
Yeah, I would say inevitable, but it was also the feeling of being up there. Like, I'm glad we have some people that can talk about this game, because really there weren't many of them from the Metro side. I think the announced crowd was 11,000, and in the Meadowlands it was empty and it was quiet.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And that was part of, I think, the feeling. Because in the early years that wasn't true, right? The ESC in the early years, like, there was a good vibe in the stadium. That started to go away as people would just maybe.
Yeah, you can blame the security for that.
Oh, it was terrible. The Meadowlands security was terrible.
They did a lot to our fans. Just
I believe they
made it a very
picked fights
inhospitable
with us
venue.
every time we went up.
Yeah, imagine that 17 times a year.
Yeah, you guys.
So, can we see some memorabilia, you guys?
Oh,
96, 97 fans. You mentioned you got a ticket. Brent, what's this? What do I got?
I don't remember how I got this, but I got this soccer ball, and I have another one, but it's one of my cherished Metro things, and I have this courtesy of a fellow who went to the same high school, and he now lives in Seattle, but he gave me this before he left for Seattle.
Is that Tim Howard and Clint on the cover?
It's Petke, Howard, Cletus, and who's the fourth?
Rodrigo Faria. Faria.
Rookie of the year.
Yeah, baby.
He got traded for Bob Bradley. He was traded for a coach.
Yes. Oh, good lord.
Rodrigo Faria.
James, you got anything for us?
Yeah, we got back in the corner here. I have my '97 championship signed ball with the original kind of miter MLS ball, a Marco bobblehead.
Does the Marco
Don't knock that
bobblehead
bobblehead
have
down.
the mullet?
Yeah. A little bit.
Oh,
Look
look
at
at
a little bit long.
that.
It's not long enough.
Does it have
And
the
I'm not sure if the
strip?
head would bobble. I got my John Harkes Bandai action figure from '96. Still in
Yeah, I
traditional
can't sing the
packaging.
Harksy song we have. Yeah, but we have a song for everybody with DC. The Harksy one was one of our more famous ones. I didn't come up with it. It was one of the older ones, and it would not be approved for this
But
podcast.
yeah, this is fun. I mean, this was fun digging out all this stuff. Looking back at old tickets, old programs. I got an Eskandarian jersey from '03. I mean, obviously we'll see him in the role he plays in the rivalry. It's fun going back to the early years and realizing that I absolutely did not throw anything.
Let's
James is a hoarder.
roll that
This is an
tape.
intervention.
Yeah.
Let's roll that tape while we talk about that. We've got the Aleko Eskandarian, of course, who is a New Jersey native himself. Did not seem to appreciate the fact that New York Metro Stars became the New York Red Bulls in this season and proceeded to have this celebration. Now he's the guy who finds players for doing stuff like this.
This is 2006. This is 2006, right? Yeah, and there you go. I remember watching this and thinking, what is he doing? Oh, he's doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, Aleko.
I remember being in 101 for that, and I think I'm not going to say.
And this was the guy right here, Christian Gomez. So
Christian
he
Gomez.
was the key
Yeah.
to the second DC dynasty. I mean, he really was the best player in the league for about 3 or 4 years.
He was a Primera B national player, right? He wasn't like the first division.
No,
He
he
played
was
for, like-
he was first division. He was because he spent
Came out of
more
Nueva
time in the
Chicago,
second
yeah.
division. Yeah, but they
What was the
Nueva
team he was with
Chicago.
before he came to DC? What was it?
Nueva
I
Chicago.
forgot.
Nueva Chicago.
Oh, okay.
To go
ahead,
back to continue with the everyone played for both teams and did everything. We watched that 06 highlight. Now we're up to 2012. But did Bruce go into the Metro Stars or Red Bulls? Did that change his allure for DC fans? Is he still, after all his Galaxy years, like a DC legend? How does that work?
I think by going to
Keith Pierce.
more teams afterwards, he's still a DC legend because he's been kind of mercenary. So people can appreciate it. If it was just Metro, Brent, how much do you wish that like Connor Lade and Alex Muil, like neither of them ever played in playoff matches? We see it like multiple times here.
I think I can add to that list besides those players. There's a long list.
I'm sure Roy Miller has to
scroll.
get a golden seat
Let me
at
bring up
that
the
table.
scroll parchment. Yeah.
Also rarely mentioned, but he was drafted. Our goalkeeper here was drafted by DC before he went to play in Germany. I believe in like one of the last rounds.
Yep. Kaiserslautern.
Yeah.
He also barely came back. He said no team
Yep,
wanted
he was
him, and he
almost
just
an
got
insurance
allocated to the
salesman,
Red
right?
Bulls.
He got I think he got time at goalie during a U.S. friendly that was in Europe, and that was his only cap, I think, or something. I forgot which opponent it was.
Yeah, it was like a weird November camp game when no one really
He's
traveled
been so
over.
good, man. The atmosphere was excellent.
Yeah, the atmosphere in this series was incredible. And this was again after 3 down years for DC, right? Because you won Open Cup in 2008, then 9, 10, 11. You guys were terrible.
Terrible.
But then this team with De Leon, Pontius, who am I looking
Is
at?
this the
as a
Rolf
center forward?
Davy Arnaud teams, or is that later?
No, this was before that. This is Branko Boskovic.
Yes.
But I
Hamdi
don't think this,
Salihi, the legend.
Yeah. I don't think this team, if you look at those, made sure the lineups before the second match, the Red Bulls were the better club this year. 2014, I think, was a more even matchup as far as talent on the field. But this was kind of Ben Olsen's first job of, over-motivating players. And taking maybe not the best talent beyond where they otherwise should have been. Oh, man, it's bad. One of the few
I wish you guys could have had the
had
game at RFK where Soli had 3 assists and Agudelo did that half volley into the upper corner.
And
they
the
all
Henri
pointed
one.
up to us. And that was the last game they allowed us as traveling supporters to be in the upper deck. So the players came up and they all started pointing up. They all pointed up at us.
Oh, Metro playoff failure.
That's why you're not allowed on the upper deck, Brent, because you just dropped it.
There you go. So,
Man, what a legend. Joel Limper.
There.
Yeah. And then
that
team was fun because it was Henry. Unfortunately, Angel was already gone.
Yeah.
And,
Latu.
Another guy who played amazing in goal.
Nahar, I think you'll see him. I think he wanted to go wildlife watching in the tunnel there at RFK, and he just got himself booted. Oh,
didn't Pahoy play in a World Cup?
I thought the series was over because he was by far the best player on that team. He's
and in Nahar.
Oh yeah, and the fact that it didn't end here, it just felt so Metro. It's like this curse is never, and this is before Metro had won, or the Red Bulls had won any of their supporter shield. So the curse of Curricula was still there. DC United again coming off years of being terrible. Give them the man advantage. Oh, just brainless. Like it should have been over right there.
So
but now it gets wild.
We don't have as much of the snow, but that settled the stage for all this, right? The night before, you got a huge snowstorm, and we sent hundreds of supporters up. And you could tell that United, being the scrappier, less talented team, wanted to go. And Olsen was raring to go. NBC did a great job with interviews. And Hans Baca and even Thierry Henry, they looked straight up scared. They did not want to play in that snowstorm. They called it off, and we turned back around and sent hundreds back up the very next night to this match, which is one of the best supporters moments I think we've ever had.
And it would be
Tell
worth
us about it
for your people.
No, I just remember a lot of the stuff going on around us for this game. It was really a tough. It was a really tough go to even get to RBA because I think the path.
Because this was Hurricane Sandy, right?
Yeah, so it wasn't exactly a fun time. And then I think.
And to set the stage, Red Bulls were supposed to host the first game because of Hurricane Sandy. There was no power in Harrison, New Jersey, so DC was forced, or chose to, or willing to host the first game and then swap the second leg to New York.
They gave up their home field advantage.
All those issues. Then you've got to snow out the night before, so now not only has the venue been changed, but the game has been changed within 24 hours to go into this one.
So we had to get buses just to get from Manhattan to RBA, and we had to do that twice. And it was really just a really tough time, just outside of the soccer game, because I live in Lower Manhattan, and that it was just pretty much darkness after 5 o'clock, so it was pretty rough.
This was when Kenny Cooper lived the BWP life of playing off Thierry Henry, and every time you scored, it was not even relief because Henry's you should have had 3 already this game.
I know. I remember
Brent, what did Henry mean? Sorry.
What do you mean?
As a player, you mentioned it. There's so many big names that had played for New York. What did it mean when he came? Was it different as a fan?
Yeah, for me, Henry is one of my favorite players of all time because he also played for Arsenal, and that's the English team that I'm cool with. So it was amazing just to see him on the field in 2010 and all this stuff, and then 2011. Where I'm just we actually have a world. Look at him. You know what I'm saying? He's wearing the Metro red and black armband. He didn't wear the Red Bull armband, so he understood what at least what some of this fan base went through, and he wanted to give us something, and thankfully he gave us the shield, and I'll always be thankful for that.
And I think this is a turning point, Doyle. Not this series, but this time period from DC's dominance to now 3 shields in the last, in a 5-year span. Open Cup final, obviously maybe not the Cup final success, but a success and a club structure on a level that New York had never seen before.
Yeah, and I think that if you talk, people like Brent who've been around, and a lot of people who've been around that team, they give Henry a lot of credit in terms of demanding stability and vision from the organization. And
if you look carefully at Henry on the field, during the games, if a player shot the ball and it went wide, he would.
Yeah.
It was
you
almost
mean
like
telling
watching The
Memby
Last
Osgood to
Dance
do
with
his-
Jordan. It was like watching The Last Dance with Jordan, like, at a player. Like, there was one time Marius Obakop, a Cameroonian player,
Yes!
who was like a draftee.
New York Red Bulls
He
2,
shot-
baby. Let's go, Marius Obakop.
He
Rainbow
shot the
FC.
ball, and it went wide. And I remember Henri was like talking to him, I guess in French, and like Marius Obakop like had his head down, like he was a child being scolded for spilling milk.
This first
And
yellow
I'm
for
like-
Marquez could have easily been red.
Well, it's Rafa.
No,
Who?
Rafa, come on now.
He
I
gets
did
his
not
elbow
acknowledge
out.
Rafa Marquez's stay with the team.
Well, Marquez is probably the greatest villain of my entire soccer watching career here. Between
Mexico and New York Red Bulls?
Yeah, considering I was at that Mexico
always
game
a
in
villain.
Korea. Yeah. I was at
were
that
you?
game in Mexico.
Oh, man. Outstanding.
Oh,
Brent, you've done some Aztecas,
I mean,
right?
Bill Hamid is just.
Yeah, I've been to
like,
Azteca
I know
4
he,
times.
He, yeah.
05, 09, 13, and 17.
I was there in 09. That's it. The only time I've done that.
Charlie
I guess
Davies
both were in that. I know.
scores against Mexico.
That
Go
moment was
Eagles!
worth it.
BC,
Silencing
baby! It's the only time I threw a cup of anything in the air as a celebratory thing. I'm not a throwing of anything kind of a person, but I'm like, Charlie Davies scored in this stadium? Go
We were
Eagles.
pelted by so much. I saw a guy backhand a beer out of the air in our section and just like drink it. And we were like,
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that Azteca is like, for me, it's you know, and people say like going to a away venue in MLS is like intimidating, all that stuff. For me,
nothing like
it
that.
will always be Azteca.
Yeah.
Always.
There's
And like in 05, we
Here
were
we go.
down.
Here we go. Pen off.
I didn't touch him. No. How can
Yeah.
you say I
I'm going
touched
to be
you?
quiet for the next minute.
Bill.
The reaction here from Bill is and to be
cannot
fair, he
believe
had been
it.
having an absolute blinder to this point. Like he had
Yeah.
kept DC United in the series to this point, but this is a clear like and obviously Kenny Cooper does embellish, but there's no question this is a penalty.
It's a penalty. Red card.
Yeah.
I remember watching this on TV and being like, after all of this, the snow, the hurricane,
Yeah.
blah, 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 like Red Bulls are going to get through when this happened. Like, and Arlo kind
I
of
did
talks
too.
about it throughout the broadcast of like, here it finally is for New York. Here it's about to happen. How
And this
little
was
we knew
like
at the
so
time.
at this point it's like Kenny Cooper taking penalties instead of Thierry Henry is weird. But it's not like inexplicable because Kenny Cooper, again, to this point, was one of the most reliable penalty takers in MLS history. I think he had taken like
And his best
15.
statistical year goal-wise was with us.
Was
I know
with
he had a
you?
good year
Yeah.
with Dallas once, but
Yeah, no, he's good.
like I remember they made
So-
him the focal point, and I think he didn't want to be the central striker. I think he wanted to be out wide a lot.
he
'cause
always
I think
wanted
with
to
Dallas,
be a winger.
and like Henri and Cahill were like, "You're going to be
Yeah.
up top, bro."
You're gonna get in the
So-
box.
And I think that's why
but-
they had a strained relationship. Maybe
Mean ass Joe Willis.
And then
So Bill Hamid
Lear-
gets sent off. Joe Willis comes on. Kenny Cooper, as you said, perfect penalty kick taker. The
fact that it was
celebrations. I
Henri
think
that
it's Dax that
encroached, too.
realizes first.
Yeah.
And he's
still
It's kind
celebrating.
of inexplicable that a player whose level. And I don't know if you remember, but Geiger did this to DC in the regular season. There was a play in the regular season where DC scored a penalty. He called it back on encroachment, and then D-Row put the ball over the bar right after that on the second kick. Same thing. Never let the player take the second penalty. If
And
the
again,
first
it
penalty
was-
is retaken, yeah.
It was the correct call. It absolutely was,
Yeah, it was.
an encroachment. And here's take two. And that's when, like, even as a neutral at this point, I was laughing my rear end off because there's only after this save, there's only one way this series ends, and it's with a bunch of happy DC United fans and players.
But it was still 20 minutes.
Marquez,
No,
I know, but look
David,
at-
it didn't.
Yeah,
It
I
didn't
know.
matter that it was still 20 minutes. That just
the
prolonged the suffering for people like Brent. Like this was, I was absolutely delighted by this because
And it was like 20
what a
degrees out too.
storyline.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Rafa.
I mean,
I would
But
be
it-
saying a lot of things in
what an
Spanish, but
idiotic
this is a
tackle.
PG-rated podcast, so I cannot say things. I'd have every
I think he
song
was
I
just- he was-
know.
he was just tired of playing.
Every song
He
I
wanted
know
off.
learned from the RGV.
Yeah, he wanted
sang
off,
at this
James.
So
He
he
was
put
done.
in this tackle.
Yep. That's
James, we're going to get to it in a moment, but
it's the only good thing he did.
one of the legends for DC over the last 15 years is Nick DeLeon in big games, and Nick DeLeon in general, just being around forever.
Yeah. Well, and he brought that with him to Toronto too. By the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, James.
No, yeah, Nicky's a clutch player. If anything, I mean, it's a little bit disappointing because after his rookie season where he was so good, he never has put it together consistently for a full season.
Wasn't he injured a lot?
Where you look like he's given that same effort. But when it comes to the clutch, and we've seen it in these highlights, and we'll see more of it in 2014, like he is there making big plays constantly.
Yep.
And you can ask Atlanta fans too about that. That was an amazing goal he scored. I have to admit, I gave him props
from Robbie Russell.
Dr. Robbie.
And this moment.
We're up there.
We're thinking
this was going to end.
Yeah. This is never going to change. If we won this match, this is never going to change. That's what that felt like.
Brett, in terms of all-time Metro losses, where does this one rank for you?
It's not above the Chicago Open Cup loss or the Columbus MLS Cup loss.
Okay, so other than those two, and maybe Sporting in the Open Cup in 2017?
I wasn't there for that.
Okay.
I mean, it sucked, but I was not in the stadium for that one. Because I was in the stadium.
Wasn't there, it didn't happen.
Right.
It didn't hurt as much because I wasn't in the stadium.
Yeah.
So this is up there. This is definitely up there. But you know, you can count the Houston playoff loss 2 years later. You know, take your pick. There was the New England road trip where Miola was in goal, where we were up 1-0 and then New England scores 3-1.
That's the 2005 playoffs. That's the last Metro Stars game.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
Tim
this is so Metro.
Roy Miller.
There's no more Metro moment than this.
This is it.
One of the greatest players of all time, Thierry Henry, standing over a free kick. To
Roy Miller.
Roy Miller.
He takes it.
Yeah.
Joe Willis is like,
Cup veteran.
I got off the hook.
Roy Miller.
Yeah, and at that
that's the reason
point,
why Roy Miller has been villainized. No matter how well he played, you know, he might because he gave in some good performances, I assume, for the team. But I'll always remember Roy Miller being terrible.
James, how off is this everyone's nice?
Yes.
I was asked about ringtones. You got the scarf.
You can't hold us back, scarf.
Oh God!
This is in the.
You can ask Bill Hamid how did the Olympic qualifiers go.
Oh, hey, it wasn't Bill Hamid. Bill Hamid got injured.
Yeah, that was Sean Johnson.
Yeah, we lost on home soil with these two guys involved.
Oh God.
That's I give Sean Johnson the same kind of guff when you know.
Yeah, I'm sure you do,
Sean
Fred.
Johnson.
I still don't trust Sean Johnson in big matches. That's.
Oh boy.
We've
James,
just got
how
this
long
on
is this
loop.
your ringtone for?
Oh, a while. This still Bill. You know, he won't admit he's Mr. DC because he thinks it makes him sound old, but he's really gotten to that status now. As long coming back and you know he's gonna be a lifer now with the club.
Yeah.
And like
we put him on DC's Mount Rushmore, just because you think he's earned that at this point.
It's tough because there's so many players that won so many trophies. He's got one, but in that really horrible year. So it's tough, but his presence in the community too, right? I think that's one of the unique things about DC and having the stadiums in the city is many of the players have lived in the city. Ben Olsen makes his home in the city and shows up random charity events. You know, Hamid does the same. And so that's the extra angle, right? Is the ability to be DC through and through. And you know, rep it in the youth soccer and the suburbs and the rest, and Bill does that.
And let's be honest, the club's had homegrowns come through. Like, there's talent in that area. Obviously,
it's
Andy Nahar and Bill Hamid.
We've not done enough with it.
That's come through. Yeah, that's fair.
But I mean, certainly players that have made an impact.
Brent, we talked about turning points. Let's go to your man, TH14. on this one.
Love
2014.
Love him.
Finally, as you said, I remember the way he organized the Supporter Shield celebration on the field after they finally won a trophy and helps do this.
See, that's what you need. That's the kind of ball you need to play if you want BWP to score in the playoffs. You need to. That's what kind of ball.
Feels like James had that one locked and loaded.
Yeah. All right.
Brent, at this point, though, in the rivalry, so, Red Bulls won the Shield, or are winning the Shield, and, you have the playoffs matchup, or, regular season matchup, and, do you feel like it's shifting as a fan? Did you feel like it was shifting at this point?
It definitely felt fun in this era to get some good results against DC United. Irrespective of whether it was the whole Ali Curtis or pre-Ali Curtis, the big, having Henry on the team and not having any high-end salary players. It was definitely fun time that they can win something either way. It was definitely cool.
Yeah.
And it definitely made a lot of the past years of the what happens if we ever actually won something or whatever. It definitely answered that question 3 times. So it was definitely fun. Definitely fun.
And these are the years of the Olsen-Petke coaching matchup. So Henry is the one calling the shots. Not just playing, but he's organizing. No, I mean, it's just
Henry and Chris Boyd were coaching the teams.
Yeah.
King of the East Coast.
A player that I can't hate. Right? He's played for a rival. He's just too classy. The guy is just too classy to really work that out. It's beautiful to watch him play.
First ballot Metro Mount Rushmore. Unanimous selection.
Man, I forgot Sabo went to DC.
Yeah.
So this is the second leg.
Oh God.
Espindola, I liked him, but it's just it was weird. I don't think he and Henry got on at all.
His teammates did not like him at all, dude. There are some legendary Fabian Espindola stories. No.
James, what's the feelings on Dax McCarty? Short DC tenure, epic Red Bull tenure.
I never saw it as people were oh, this is Dax's revenge. It's I don't see how DC did him wrong in the sense that they brought him in to be the centerpiece of the club, and they made him captain, and it just didn't work out. But I think they pulled the trigger too early. Olsen would probably tell you, that 2011 season, you traded Dax, you fell out with Charlie Davies, and probably blew things up too early. With some of those players, and that was when Olsen was a young coach that didn't know much about what he was doing. So I didn't have the negative feelings about him leaving, and of course we got an MVP in return for the short term. But it ended up being a really bad move.
One of a few in this time period. Although, Doyle, we talk about KC, how they built through the draft. If Pontius stays healthy and DeLeon stays healthy to an extent, that's a core right there. Perry Kitchen as well, a part of that. That they hit on, they just couldn't keep it all, as James said, weathered together.
Yeah, this was in the time before the reserve teams were a big part of the whole setup for teams.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
DC was they only just started their reserve team recently. So
yeah.
They've had to rely on the draft and trades and home, stuff like that.
And Dave Casper has actually always been good in that format of player acquisition. But there was a period, this was a great atmosphere in the stadium. When DeLeon scores, again, that you get the feeling of, is this happening again? Are we going to make that comeback? It's a cold, crisp day. It's the blackout. And then it just kind of gets, it sinks for us. And it is. This is the game where everything shifts.
Brent, you mentioned
hopefully not permanently.
Brent, you mentioned as an away fan at DC, you used to sit up top. Was it this series or
Yeah.
2012 when you brought 5,000 fans or some crazy number for New York?
Yeah, I wasn't there for the game. It was the 14 game where it was Peggy. it was Henry to Peggy Luyandula, and then there's the famous thing where Henry runs to the corner flag and does like that big like celebration, and Roy Miller's like on top of him like celebrating, and I'm like,
oh, Dax.
Hey, Dax with a header. Very good.
Yeah, I mean,
so yeah, RFK was a. I hated RFK because it wasn't exactly the most modern stadium, but it was definitely, you knew you were. It was like almost like an Azteca experience, just the same amount of undesirables within the stadium. So singing the same lame songs over and over, but it was definitely a place that, you know, when you were there, you're like, you got to keep your eye out, but you got to make sure you sing louder because you want to be so loud that people want to come at you because you're singing that loud, you're being that insulting and vulgar. It's basically the only place where where the filter was off in terms of any chance. I mean, we basically played for it every time we were there. Every time.
James, for you and Doyle, and you guys mentioned it, like at the beginning it was the pinnacle of MLS environments. When does it shift a little bit, or did it not, and it's just good that you got a new stadium?
You know, RFK could always produce, even to the end, a very good environment. When it came to it, where we had the stronger teams, even if it wasn't game in and game out anymore, you know, you put 20,000 people in RFK in the lower bowl, it got loud because of the roof, just because of how it was set up. And those blackout playoff games were, you know, always were very good environments till the end. What I think everyone knew, supporters and beyond, was the finances. It wasn't like this. The stadium wasn't a good place to play. The field was always gorgeous. It's the finances sunk the club, and their decade-long struggle, which has now ended, set them back for so long and really devastated every part of the club.
Wasn't the stadium rent similar to Giant Stadium's stadium rent? It was
right,
astronomical.
Exactly. And it's owned by the city. There was no concessions, no parking. Now, that also it was free for all for the supporters. Like, we could do whatever we wanted at the parking lot. Yeah, Lot 8 was like, you know, we ran full, you know, buffet lines and the rest because they didn't care what we did.
Yeah, it was the opposite of Foxborough, where you can't say certain things. So RFK is like, we get to go all out. Nice.
So you guys
11 on this one.
Both fans of original clubs that spent a long time playing in football stadiums, and now have your own soccer-specific stadiums. Part of the early culture of MLS was the tailgate, whether it was Lot 8 or 16A. Do you still have that these days? And if you don't, do you miss that?
The tailgating now around RBA, it exists because there's a lot of gravel lots because it's a location being converted. But the tailgates at Giant Stadium were pretty epic, and the one for the Beckham game in 2007, oh my god, I think we showed up like 4 hours before. It was the origin of the word 10 man. But it's not as it can be crazy, but it doesn't seem as crazy as the Giant Stadium days at all. And you know, but I do like the fact that we have RBA, and it's the most expensive umbrella I've ever just done and stand under and a match. It's awesome. It could be torrential outside, but I'm dry, and that's amazing. Love it.
And for us, it's definitely changed. I mean, for Screaming Eagles, we worked real hard to find a site. We actually partner with this environmental nonprofit. Dave's been down there, a couple blocks from the stadium, where we can put a few hundred people in the building and still do our free beer for members and the rest. So we still have our big pre-match party, but we don't have kind of all the supporters just mingling and bouncing back and forth. And that was something that's a loss, because there's really no parking around Audie at all. And
I'd have to agree with us too that because there isn't like the large lot to tailgate in, everyone kind of went in their own. It's like the Tower of Babel, you know. It's like the parking lots of these NFL stadiums are like the big collecting, you know, areas for like just random people, and people just show up.
Or people that come to
like become lifelong members or fans or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's different now when you have to go to a supporter bar down the street, you know, this place or whatever. It's just different.
And just so folks know, that's how Brent and I became friends. Like, Brent and I have been friends 15, 20 years now, just from tailgating in Giant Stadium, Lot 16A, Giant Stadium parking lot. It was, and I will say, yeah, at times. It's a unique culture that I do hope Obviously, I love the new era of soccer-specific stadiums. Every single one, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely gorgeous because they are better placed to watch and enjoy this sport we all love. But part of what I loved about being an MLS fan was the mixture of what is frankly an American tradition, tailgating, with all, like, I remember going to Lot 8 and having Bolivian food, pupusas, and like everything from around the world, and people of all different colors and backgrounds and creeds mixing together. It was wonderful, and I do hope that there's a way for Screaming Eagles, ESC, everyone around the league to continue to enjoy that pre- and post-game festivities.
I can attest to this, though. James mentioned they're set up right along the river, looking out on the river with the stadium about a block away. I went for one pregame. They did have a falafel food truck outside, so things are still okay. The food's still pretty good. It was awesome. They follow me now on Twitter. We talk all the time about Middle Eastern food, so shout out to them. James had a nice little
There should
jab
be a Metro
earlier on
shawarma,
BWP.
and we'll get you back.
Okay, yeah. If you bring me Taim, Brent, then we're good. So, James, you want to cover your eyes now because this is Brent's time to brag about his legend, BWP. I think this is the second game ever, actually, in Audi Field history. And Brad scores his 100th goal and does an Ian Wright-style celebration.
Wow, that's...
Brent, was this a kind of an emotional moment for you guys because BWP had meant so much to all three of those Shield-winning teams?
Yeah, for me, I thought it was a good testament to, just how he just, no matter what, no matter who he was with on the field, he kept, producing. And to see him do that, I'm just I forgot where I was because I wasn't at the game, but I remember just being so happy for him. And it was a good time.
And then he followed it up later that
later.
year, Brent, with this performance.
Yeah,
This was a great match. This was one of the most underrated rivalry matches the last number of years. I'm going to blame the MLS marketing folks for that, but I thought this particular match was. I've lost the get angry after every loss feeling now. Watching a lot of years, I was pissed after this match. I walked home, 40 minutes from the stadium. BWP was excellent.
Yeah, he definitely had his moments, and I'm appreciative for all of them. And the fact that his dad played for Arsenal too. I mean, that's another big thing for him.
Brent's in heaven with all these Arsenal, New York connections.
F Tottenham. F Tottenham.
I really had forgotten about this match, but Rooney had a brace, right? And then
the Acosta goal, his third Acosta goal, is freaking nuts.
Yeah.
It's so weird how the DC's team is so different after having all these other guys and now they're just gone. It's just
it feels like the shoe's on the other foot because DC's just been lacking stability and haven't been able to build and keep that core together, so it's been so up and down. God, what a half season Acosta had.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
PSG, right, for $10 million. That was allegedly the thing.
Yeah,
right?
It's been reported out by a bunch of people now. So
there's a lot of uncertainty about actually what was on the table and how much middlemen were getting. But yeah, they didn't pull the trigger. It was a short amount of time, and it cost them. And frankly, Acosta blew up the team in 2019.
What a touch by. Who is this with the touch? Is that Royer? No, that's Mule.
No.
Mule.
It's the Georgetown kid.
Yeah, Georgetown guy.
Our only Manhattan player.
And Birnbaum hits the post.
Oh, Bernie. Cal Bears legend.
So, James, for you, Audi Field now, Red Bull Arena, a lot of new big faces, at the front. What does the Atlantic Cup mean to you now? Different or similar, and what do you see as the future?
I'll say what I hope for the future, but maybe is another way to put it. The rivalry, clearly, we've seen these two times where the first half, DC is clearly the superior both team and organization. And then it completely flips on its head. And Red Bull has built a much more comprehensive, better organization that's turned into winning on the field. I hope that both these clubs can be competitive, because that's what will generate the big matches, is if both the matches are good. And I hope Red Bull steps up their ambition. We see maybe it's slipped a little bit from the ownership side about, are both these clubs going to compete for trophies? And I hope it does, because the Atlantic Cup will follow within a quarter. Both clubs are ambitious, because we're in markets that, between talent, media eyes, that it certainly can happen.
Brent, for you on your side, yeah. What is Metro Stars?
First
Red
of all,
Bulls? What is it?
For me, I don't call it the Atlantic Cup. I call it DC Hate Week, because that's what it is. So the Atlantic Cup was something that the league came up with, right? So I still don't say it, but yeah, I would like us to be at the forefront in terms of like our premier rival. And since I'm one of the older guys, like DC will always be my number one rival. And I know with a lot of people, City has kind of taken that, and I understand, So, but I do want us to be better, so that the matchups are just like the ones we've seen before, like in this podcast. So, but the thing is, they've all kind of blurred into like happy sadness. There's like I don't really remember instances anymore, because there's just been so many games that I've been to. It's just like, but I do want this rivalry to be as important as it used to be, because I don't think it is, at least for some people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's just how it goes. But I would like us, because I don't like City either, but it's for different reasons. There wasn't a diaspora of like fans of Metro that left to go to DC. There was a lot of Red Bull fans that left to go to City, and so that's where that rivalry, at least for me, for City is. But for DC, it's just like, you're over there, I'm over here, let's keep it. It's like you're looking over the fence at the other neighbor, like, yeah, I don't like it. You know what I mean? City, it's different, and that's why the DC Metro RBNY rivalry will always be tops for me.
Doyle, they mention it, but for anyone, we all want this sport to grow and this league to grow. We talk about it every year. As it has, though, these two teams haven't been good at the same time over the last 5, 6, 7 years. The rivalry has changed, as Brent said. But this rivalry, a lot of it built Major League Soccer. The atmospheres at RFK Giant Stadium, the drama, the moments, you mentioned the curse of Caricola. Like, those were the things that MLS was built around that helped it become what the league it is today.
Yeah, there was proof of concept, especially with those early DC teams, with the way they put fans into that stadium and created an atmosphere and created a team that could dominate within the league and compete for international titles. In '98, again, they won the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which is the precursor to the Champions League, and then we talked about it, they beat that great Vasco da Gama team in the Copa Interamericana. That, and then having traveling fans going in both directions and creating these absolutely amazing moments. I think that was, like you said, was a genesis for a lot of what the league wanted to become and had to work to become. And I think that's why DC versus Metro, DC versus Red Bulls, will always be one of the long-standing rivalry in the league and like a traditional rival. But like James said, and what Brent has alluded to, there have to be more games with stakes. It has to get back to that in one way or another. If these teams could, figure out a way to both get into the playoffs. That's actually what was so fun about that last game we watched, because DC in the second half of 2018, they were really good again. It felt like that team could actually win MLS Cup, and of course the Red Bulls were on that supporter shield run. But at the same time, everybody was kind of focused more on Atlanta. So there needs to be a couple of games, a couple of seasons where these two teams are button heads. And then overall, it does feel like that whole I-95 corridor could end up being sort of an NFC East type of things, where you have the Giants, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Washington football team, where they all just kind of hate each other equally. That's what we want.
Dare I say it's like the old Big East Conference? The old Big East Conference?
There you go.
Every market.
And on that note, it's been a lot of fun. It's great to watch
UConn
some of the great
Huskies,
moments in this league's
symbol of
history.
might to
James,
the
thanks for
foe.
joining us. Brent, thanks for joining
AJ
us.
Dillon,
Matt,
a
thanks for
Connecticut
joining
player.
us.
Played for
Hopefully
Boston
going
College.
forward, we'll have more games. Gonzalo Higuain will have something to say about it. I'm sure Sean Davis will have something to say about it on the other side, and Matt Doyle will play us out. This has been MLS Classics Remix Atlantic Cup Fan Edition. Have a great day.